You can support this podcast on patreon.com/firstpawmedia.
Here's to the adventure-seeking dog mushers out there. The hundreds of you who stand on the runners dreaming and thinking about the northern lights. Of course, there is something else you can do if you've got something to say. Start a podcast with First Paw Media and harness your creative side. Maybe even earn enough money. Enough money to tell yourself, hey, I'm not just a dog musher, I'm a rover. I'm a wanderer. I'm a voyager. I'm an explorer. Visit firstpaw.media. Mush on over today.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Robert and I am joined tonight by my co-hosts, Michelle and Tony, and we are continuing our Iditarod 2023 coverage. And yep, folks, the race is still going on. Can you believe it? We have 14, almost 15 mushers that have crossed the finish line into Nome. And we're going to jump into that in just a second, but we do want to welcome our newest Patreon member, Rebecca. Thanks for supporting us. And we also want to wish Gerhardt a happy birthday today. I know he's still out there on the trail and hopefully doing very well. So enjoy your time. Maybe somebody will slide you a piece of cake when you make it into Nome, I'm sure. All right, so into Nome right now, we have Ryan, Peter, Richie, Matt, Jesse, Kelly, Eddie, Matt, Milla, Wade, Hunter, Dan, Christian, Jesse, and according to Tony and the GPS tracker, Aaron should be in relatively soon. At the back of the pack, we have Jed Stevenson, Bridget Watkins, Jason Mackey, Bailey, Joanna, Gerhardt, and Mike Williams Jr. Sadly, we did have another scratch since we aired last night. That was Eric Kelly, who scratched in Unicalete. Let's jump with that one first. Tony, what do you know about Eric?
He scratched for the well-being of his team. There wasn't a lot of information. I checked his fan page earlier today, and they just posted that, you know, everybody's fine, everybody's doing great, but that he had chosen to scratch. They didn't have any more information than that. They assumed it was partially due to the windstorm that was basically keeping everybody hunkered down.
And that was pretty much the story of the day. What do you know about that? Because I know on a bunch of pages they were saying everybody's fine. There is a little bit of a storm coming on, but what do you know about that?
So we started seeing the winds pop up last evening. Even as Ryan and Pete and Richie were coming in, the wind had picked up. According to Pete Kaiser's racing page, they shared just a little bit about what Pete had shared with them, that coming into the blowhole, they were getting knocked off the trail. They're having a hard time finding the trail because of the wind gusts that were, they estimated, going as hard as 50 miles an hour. Matt Thaler came in a little while later and said that he actually had to walk in front of his team because he has a lot of females in his team, and they're so light that they were just getting picked up. So he was actually walking with them so that he could keep them on course and not getting blown away. Standard, typical stuff that we've heard the last few years. It's starting to feel like lather, rinse, repeat when we get to that little section between White Mountain and Nome. But it was a windstorm that continued throughout the night into the morning and early afternoon, and Mark Nordman had sent word to the checkpoints to suggest strongly to the teams that they hunkered down and that their safest window to start again would be about 1 p.m. today. And that's when we really started seeing movement. There were a few teams that left earlier than that out of White Mountain because the winds had started to die down there already. But the Shack-Tulik crew, which is all of the back of the pack, fans are starting to call them the Shack Pack. So I guess that's what we should call them. It feels very reminiscent of the Elam 11 from a few years ago. They took off at 1 o'clock, just like they had told everyone they planned to. They went in a group, and I'm looking at the GPS right now. Jason Mackey, very Boozer-esque, is in the very back so that he can kind of play the sweep, I assume, and get those rookies to the next checkpoint of Koyuk. And I'm looking at it right now, and that line, they are almost off the ice and into Koyuk. They've got probably, for Jason, he's probably got another 2 hours. So in the next couple of hours, they'll be in Koyuk, and I'm sure very happy to take a long rest. But yeah, for all of the wind and everything, poor Katie Jo was stuck out in it probably around the same time she was last year. I'm sure she was sitting there going, why me? But she just reached the checkpoint of safety. She'll be in Nome in probably about 3 hours. So everything's going well now, but it was pretty windy. If you go on to Eddie Burke Jr.'s Instagram page, he shared a fan's video of him coming into safety. It's a gorgeous video, but you just see these waves of snow being blown at him. It's very cool. So it was yet another Iditarod windstorm to talk about.
So, Tony, I really like that name, Shack Pack. You know, every year we seem to have an overriding hashtag that sticks with them. I wonder if anybody will make any shirts that say that, because I think that's a pretty cool one for this year's Iditarod.
If they don't do it for the group that just left Shack-Tulik, that should be what all of the volunteers go by from now on, is the Shack Pack.
I like it. So obviously you have insider, we don't, so you get to see some of the videos and coverage and all that sort of stuff that's happening in Nome. One thing that I've always found really peculiar is there'll be huge crowds the first day when, you know, the top 10 or 12 mushers come in. At least that's what it came in this year. But then it dies down very, very quickly. And often by the time you get to midweek, there's just a couple of people standing out there, the press, the family, a couple of diehards, and so on. What does it look like in Nome right now?
About what you'd expect. As Dan Caduce came in earlier, I was watching, he had his posse that always comes out, but there wasn't this huge crowd around him. When it gets to this part in the race, actually even from like second on down, fans are actually able to kind of just wander into the chute while the dogs are there. I guess security is kind of lax there. At least from my experience, I was able to be in the chute when Ryan Santiago came in 2019. I was in the chute for a little bit when Iappa came in. Her rookie run was in 2019. So they came in together. So I was in for that. Just because I was grabbed by a person and said, hey, come take pictures. Don't just stand out there. And so I did. And just stuff like that. It's very relaxed. So it didn't look from the live feed that there's a whole lot of people out on the street, but it was also during the day, and people do work in Nome. And so that also plays into it. They shut everything down for the champions, so you do get like the top 3 or 4. You kind of get that big crowd, but then everything does go back to somewhat normal for Nome, other than Front Street shut down until the last mushers in. But I'm actually looking at the live camera right now, and it looks like somebody has a stroller in there right now. So I don't know if Aaron's got a little baby and that's who that is, or if we've just got a jogging stroller in there. I don't know.
You know, it's pretty interesting what you said, that folks are allowed to be in the chute. And I'm thinking about what happened with the drugging of the dog several years ago. That was a huge story. And secondly, I know probably 99% of our fans do not know this, but this is a story worth mentioning because of what you just said. Just last week at a race over in France, there was somebody put down poisoned meatballs along the trail, and it ended up killing several dogs, several mushing dogs, because people were allowed access to the trail. And I know that's very difficult to police, but it should be easier to police the finishing chute. Man, there could be all sorts of issues that could develop there, and I think that is bad logistics. Let's talk about that for just a second. Michelle, what do you think about that? I don't care how many people are there. They should close down the chute.
I'm actually flabbergasted at the fact that it's not.
You guys are going to get me in trouble. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything.
I don't think it's going to get you in trouble. I think it's worth bringing up. I mean, everybody out there is armchair quarterbacking this thing, and yet they're overlooking something that potentially could cause a musher to become disqualified for life and have their reputation ruined, let alone have their dogs become harmed. And I mean, they don't do the drug testing in the chute, Robert. They do it over at the dog yard. And quite honestly, I don't understand why those dogs aren't under some sort of security or watchful eye until the veterinarian has drawn their blood and taken that sample to see if they have been drugged or given enhancements or whatever the rules say. But my God, I mean, I understand it's Nome and we're all pretty decent people here in Alaska, but there's people that sneak up.
Tony, what do you think?
I think I'm going to get in trouble for saying anything. It's one of those things where I don't know if it's just because it's hard to tell who belongs where. It's not relaxed at the dog lot. They're very, very secure there. I've even been kind of shooed away from there, even when I'm hanging out with a musher that's there with their dogs. So I don't know if it's just because it is Nome and they're so used to it or what. But you can also, when there's no teams in there, that's when you can really get in the chute. And I think that's possibly how people get in there. I had connections, I guess, when I was there in 2019. I did know Ryan kind of. So maybe that's why the question wasn't there when I was there. But I don't know. It's one of those things where it feels so charming, but, then you bring up this story in France, which I had not seen that. I'd seen that some dogs had been sick, but nobody had said what was going on there.
Well, but Tony, I don't think that it's not about you. I mean, in this situation, you're one of those people that everybody knows, right? It comes back to the security at the ceremonial start. It also, nobody's really, I mean, people are coming up to the dog mushers at their dog trucks and things, but once they're in that race chute, they're hands off. You're not supposed to be just walking up and doing whatever. You have to have an armband on that identifies that you've been allowed to be in there. And the same goes for the restart in Willow. So why wouldn't we expect the same thing at the finish?
Yep, I agree. And for folks that are not familiar with the way that things are set up in Nome, it's pretty much right there on the main street in town. And the chute, unless you've seen it on video, it's in the middle of the road. So it's not, this self-contained type situation. Cars are coming and going when the road's not closed and all that, because there's several offshoots to this main road, of course. Then they just have just a little ways down, they have the chute itself with the banners and all that. And then you have the burled arch, which is sort of arched up on on a hill of snow, and then the dogs cross over that. They do what they do. They do the mandatory checks and the photos and the handshakes and all that. Then they go down the little bit of hill, then sort of right around the corner, if you will, to the dog lot. And that's where Tony was saying it's pretty dang secure, much more secure than it was several years ago when the supposed drug doping happened. But that area is very secure. But when you're sort of milling around Nome, it's sort of almost like an attraction in the middle of town, isn't it, Tony? It's just sort of there. And anybody can just kind of come up and do what they want, especially if nothing's happening at that moment.
Right. Yeah. I mean, everyone that goes to Nome, you can get your picture right under the burled arch in that little chute. They do block it off, and there are a couple of volunteers that, make sure people get out of the way so that the team will come up the snow ramp, if you will, into the chute instead of trying to go around it. That's where they have their little chute guards or whatever. I don't remember what the armband says. I think it just says security or volunteer on it. And then they try to keep the dogs from going to the side, because the dogs don't want to necessarily go in the chute. That's confusing to them. They'd rather go on the sidewalk because that looks like an actual path. But it doesn't look like they have that problem this year, because the chute is much nicer looking than what I'm looking at the sidewalks right now.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, it is a very odd situation. I don't know necessarily why there's not, more of an armband situation.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and a little bit of behind the scenes, or how the sausage is made a little bit. First off, the burled arch is not that large, nor is it very tall, just a few feet taller than the average guy. And then in the off season, they pretty much just pick it up and move it a couple of blocks over, and it just sits there all year long. It just looks like a pretty big fence arch, if you will. And for such a historic icon of not only the Iditarod, but of dog mushing in general, it's just really interesting to see kind of it just being off the side of the road on the odd June afternoon. I'm sure that you've seen it that way as well, haven't you?
I've just seen pictures. I have never seen it not in the chute in person, because I've only been to Nome twice, and it's for Iditarod.
Gotcha. Well, you have to go in the summer. It's pretty awesome there weather-wise.
I know.
In the summer. And I think, what is it, only like 500 Alaska airline miles or something like that each way. So you can get up there and back for really cheap. So let's move on, guys. We've talked a little bit about our trail report and where folks are at in terms of when they'll be coming in. So what do you think, Tony? We forecasted about 15-ish or so last night when we went off the air. Where do you think we'll be by tomorrow night at this time? Do you think we'll be down pretty close to the end there into the 25s, or do you think everybody will be in pretty close to
by
tomorrow?
No.
I don't expect everybody in tomorrow, because the back of the pack isn't even in Koyuk yet.
Oh, that's right.
So I think we've got a little bit of time there.
And they still have to do their 8 hours. Yes. So I would say,
right.
and my days are running together. I think it's Thursday because I was supposed to have my UAA class today,
Wednesday.
But it's only Wednesday. So we are a day early for sure. So let's move on. We've talked a little bit about the news or the stories of the day, and we want to jump right in tonight to talk about our musher of the night. What do you know about Jed Stevenson, a guy from Idaho? What can you tell us, Tony?
Well, I did speak with his family, and I did get a little bit of info from them, so I can definitely start off with the questions. I asked, of course, what is one thing that you would like fans to know about Jed, or who Jed is, I'm sorry, and what makes him tick? And they answered, Jed is curious and always learning. This, combined with his incredible work ethic, makes life with him one big adventure after another. He also has one of the best laughs I've ever heard, and it's contagious. And then I asked, what is something he has to have when mushing, not including mandatory gear, of course. And she said, Jed asked his family and friends for their favorite hype song, HYPE, to use in a playlist created for Iditarod. It includes songs such as Monster by Skillet, Can't Keep It In by Yusuf and Cat Stevens, This Is Me by Keela Settle. This is not my genre of music, so I'm sorry, I don't recognize these names. And I Didn't Come This Far to Only Come This Far by Fearless Motivation, and On Top of the World by Imagine Dragons. That song I know. And I responded with, I love the playlist idea, how cool. And she responded, he wanted resources to turn to for inspiration, especially for the dark places he knew he would enter into during the really hard moments on the trail.
I love it. And I love finding out stories about these back of the pack guys. And Michelle, you're going to tell us a little bit about his bio on Iditarod.
Sure. So, interestingly enough, Jed grew up in Germany as an American Army brat. And, he had a wonderful father that read to him a book. And I bet a lot of our fans might be able to guess which book he was read to that's all about mushing by none other than Gary Paulson. He learned to train sled dogs working with Billy Snodgrass out of Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And then he furthered his training with Linwood Fiedler in Alaska and Gabe Dunham. And he does like to speak highly of his beautiful wife, Amy, and their twin boys. And they have settled down in northern Idaho, which is absolutely a beautiful area of the country. If you haven't been to northern Idaho, I highly recommend visiting there. And Jed has received awards like Best Cared For Team in the Eagle Cap 200. The Idaho Sled Dog Challenge 300. He also got Best Cared For Team. He has received the Sportsmanship Award at the Race to the Sky 300 for catching a runaway dog team. And he is also one of only 4 people to finish the Rocky Mountain Triple Crown, which is an 800 grueling miles in the mountains. And it took 3.5 weeks.
Very interesting. Tony, did we talk about Jed back when we were doing the Eagle Cap preview and recap? I believe we did, didn't we?
We did. We did mention him when we did that. We didn't know quite that much about him, as I recall, but we did talk about him. And I do have a Facebook post of his that I wanted to read because he does work in the ER when he's not dog mushing. And he answered a question by fans back in December. And he said, some have asked me why I don't start a dog sled tour company and do tours as a profession. It is a lot of fun, also a lot of work, and you can make a lot of money if you do it right. Tours are fun and adventurous, but the ER is heavy and deep. I believe we all need to bear the weight of society in some way or fashion, and for some, doing dog sled tours is their way. But the best way for me to carry that burden is by working in the ER. In the ER, you bear the burden of society by helping clean the wounds of people who have split their wrists, or by getting heart attacks to the cath lab fast, or by giving clot-busting medicine for life-altering strokes, or doing chest compressions to someone who is coded, or even the small stuff like reassuring people that they are going to be okay. Dog mushing is awesome, and it fills a very important role in my life, but the ER is where I do my heavy lifting for society. Just an all-around awesome guy. I would love to know more about him.
Robert, I hope that you are going to invite him to come on to the show.
Yeah, I would like to have Jed on. Just a couple of points on my side. First off, I love his kennel name, Nordic Wayfinding Racing Kennel. And I probably said that same thing when we were talking about Jed in the Eagle Cap Extreme Race. But secondly, we find it almost every year that that we have Jed is an ER nurse, according to his website. We always have these guys and gals sign up for Iditarod. I don't know how many ER nurses and docs that we've had, but I'm just thinking right off the top. Matt Paviglio was one. What's the lady's name that had a heck of a time out there, who was also an ER nurse? I believe she was the Red Lantern winner a couple of years ago. Do you recall that story?
I don't know about that, but I do know that Bridget Watkins is a nurse, I believe, in the ER. And then you have Joanna Jaggow, I believe, is also a nurse. I know we've got two ladies that are out there right now that are nurses, and I'm pretty sure it's Joanna, and I know it's Bridget.
I was actually, the name came to me. I was actually thinking about Jane Faulkner, I believe is her name, or Adkins, one of the two. Jane Adkins.
Yeah.
She was an ER nurse, I believe. So yeah, that the race really attracts those type of folks, and it could be like what Jed said, just a ability to give back, and I think that is a cool way to go. So. We will definitely reach out to Jed when he's done with Iditarod and probably back home and recuperating. Tony, do you know if Jed is running somebody else's dogs, or did he bring his own up, or what?
That I haven't been able to quite figure out. I know that he stayed at Linwood's home. I kind of feel like he has at least some of his dogs, just from the posts that I'm able to read. I'm not actually friends with him on Facebook, so I can't get all of the details. And that was something that I should have asked his wife when I was chatting with her today. But it's amazing. He's had a lot of bumps along the way. His 1,000 pounds of meat that he had ordered came in the night before his drop bags were due. So he and Linwood spent all night cutting the meat and then sorting and packing all of his drop bags to get it through to drop bag day there at Iditarod. And he said that Mark Nordman came up to him there at that drop bag collection and said, "You're halfway to Nome. Just getting your drop bags here. That's half the battle."
Yeah,
so it's been really exciting to see him carry on, and he's actually, he's almost to Koyuk, so he's almost there. We know that there's still a lot of trail left, but he's so close. So I'm really pulling for him.
Yeah, that whole drop bag requirement is a big deal, and I think we should talk about that in the off season. That's a cool process in of itself, and just the amount of work and manpower that it takes to get that done for sure. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about our question of the day. Last night we asked you guys, what is the greatest sports moment you ever witnessed? And I was following along with this, Tony, and I happened to wake up at about 2:30 in the morning and saw some retweets or whatever. So I saw a few of them, but it really didn't pick up until sometime today. What were folks saying about their greatest sports moment?
A lot of them listed the Miracle on Ice, which of course was in 1980 during the Olympics when Team USA's hockey team defeated the Soviets in not even the medal round, right? It was right before the medal round, I think.
Yes.
I don't know. I wasn't born yet.
Yes,
I wasn't born yet, so I don't know. I have seen the Disney movie, and I love it. It's one of my favorite sports movies, but it's different than actually getting to view it. And then a friend of ours, they're an ugly dog. They helped me in Anchorage. Heather, she listed some of the top sports moments that she's seen over the years in person. A lot of baseball moments she listed, but she listed as her number one seeing Ryan Reddington come into the finish at Nome. She said that was an incredible experience. Now that just happened, so she's still riding that high, and it'll be interesting to see what she says in a few years, because she does go to a lot of sporting events. So it'll be interesting to see if she still holds on to that as her number one. But that was kind of cool to see that Ryan got a couple of shout outs Marilyn Mapes' mom, mom to Meredith Mapes, she said her greatest sports moment was watching her daughter come under the burled arch back in, I believe it was 2018. Several parents actually keyed in on, their greatest sports moment was watching their child do something, in sports. So a lot of that, but I think the Miracle on Ice won. I think that got the most votes.
Yeah, and I had forgotten all about the World Series earthquake back in the day, and I know that you commented that you were watching that on TV. Michelle, I'm sure you saw that as well, right?
Of course I did.
Yeah, and I was
8 years old.
That was a big event in sports history for sure. And you had mentioned Heather in your discussions. I believe that is the same Heather that is now a Patreon supporter. She came in just the other day. So thank you to you if it is the same Heather, because her Twitter handle is the same as her Patreon handle. It's something like, "Hi, I'm Heather," or something like that. Same person?
Warm Heatherette, I think, is the Heather that I know on Twitter.
Something like that. So very interesting responses. So let's move over to tonight's question of the day. And we talked a little bit about it earlier on when we were talking about the Shack Pack and Jason Mackey doing his thing and probably sweeping the trail for a lot of these rookie mushers. And Michelle said, man, that's not only Jason. We talked a couple of nights ago about him pretty much sacrificing his Iditarod a few years ago to help out his brother. It looks like he is doing something very similar here, not necessarily sacrificing his race, but definitely exhibiting some servant leadership. And that is a huge deal. Like you said, Tony, it harkens back to a few years ago with the Elam 11 and Martin Musher sort of playing Grandpa Martin there and making sure everybody was okay. So if that is in fact what Jason is doing, that is definitely a cool story for sure. So we're going to go with that theme, assuming that's what's happening on the trail. And the question is a little bit different than it's been in nights past. In nights past, it's been pretty vague, if you will, or pretty easy to answer, like what's your favorite snack or who's your favorite musher or whatever.
Lighthearted,
not vague, lighthearted. So this one should make you think a little bit. The question is, what leaderships do you have and how have they come to light at one period or another? So if you've had to step up into a leadership role, whether at work or in your family or in your community or in your church or whatever, how has that come up in your daily life? We would really like to hear it. And Michelle and I know a thing or two about leadership. I have too many degrees in leadership probably than I need. And Michelle is working on her master's in a leadership discipline right now. So I am really interested to hear what you guys have to say. So the IDITA question of the day is, what leadership qualities do you have and how have they helped your community in one way or another? Tony will post it right after the show. Hashtag IDITA question. Please check it out and respond, and we'll talk about them tomorrow. So, Michelle, what did we miss, or what else do you have for us before we go?
Well, I think that we missed nearly 35 minutes of our traditional show length, but that is because that's because you've got some big night this evening with your students from the University of Alaska Anchorage that are doing your Mushing 101 course.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I know that there are very few opportunities, at least here in the United States, where you can actually sign up for a dog mushing course in college, get credit for it, and have the experience of your life. So I'm very honored to have that position at both the University of Alaska Anchorage and also Alaska Pacific University. And hopefully We still have a decent enough trail out there. I haven't been out there since last weekend, but it is warming up quickly, and I hope that these guys can get a good experience over this past weekend. Tony, what do you have that we missed, or anything else before we go?
We didn't miss it because we didn't talk about it, but I do want to give a shout out right now. Christian Turner holds the fastest time from safety to Nome. I believe only the top 20 get entered for that. So we've got about 5 more chances for him to get bumped off. And I don't know, it could be Nicholas Petit could really turn on the afterburners and beat that time, or Ramey Smith's right there. He's running in 19th place, or will when he gets out of White Mountain tonight. So it's still exciting. There are races within the race, so keep watching. Keep watching
for sure. And that is one of the awards, isn't it? The fastest time from safety to Nome? Yep. Yeah, I thought it was. So we'll talk about those awards as well on our Sunday night banquet show for sure. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Make sure you tell your family and friends. And if you're so inclined, head on over to patreon.com/firstpawmedia and become a patron. It's just so that you can show us a little support. Remember, this show will stay free for as long as we possibly can do it, out of the goodness of our hearts, and we've been doing this since 2009, so rest assured it's going to be a while. Otherwise, we will be back on the air tomorrow. We have 3 or 4 more nights of this before we hang up our Iditarod coverage and move on. So on behalf of my co-hosts, Michelle and Tony, this is Robert for our Iditarod show. We'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
From Dogworks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your host is Robert Forto. Our producers are Michelle Forto, Alex Stein, and Tony Ryder. Our executive producer is Robert Forto. Created for Dogworks Radio and First Paw Media.